let's go ahead. Should we go ahead and start? And I'm sure we'll have some people popping in and out. But Dr. Bruder, thank you so much again for joining us today. We do hope that for our next summit in next April, we'll be able to have you in person.
I'd love to be, yes.
Yes, and we're hoping that we're going to get to that point. But, you know, it goes without saying that the work you've done has been so influential in the field over the many years, and all of your support, and especially for trying to really improve the systems that we have, the systems of care for early childhood and early intervention. And we're really, really fortunate to have you here today, and that you've been such a mentor as we've progressed in the grant. So thank you very much, Mary Beth. And Chris, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add before we get started, and we'll just let you take it away.
No, I put in the link to the survey in the chat. And I believe Dr. Bruder is going to have folks introduce themselves in the chat, and we'll collect that information as well. And we are recording. So if you want to turn your camera on, we'd love to see you. But if you don't want that, then feel free to turn your camera off. But we will be doing some breakout groups as well. And Dr. Bruder will just let me know when that'll happen.
Great. I'll share the agenda after we do introductions. First, I have to repeat back the compliments to Bev and Chris. The work you are doing in Texas is really ahead of the crowd. You have looked at systems, and you have a great group of people you're working with. So this is as beneficial to me as I hope I'm able to give back to you with some of the things I've learned, because I'm learning from you all in terms of the implementation practices that you're doing. And it's great to see all of you, and it's great to see your faces, because after 2+ years of Zoom, you know, talking to screens is just really, it's old. You know, it's gotten old. And I was explaining before some of you came on, I'm actually in a hotel, somebody's room, because we're doing a training, a face-to-face in a hotel. We just started last month, and this is a small group, because Connecticut is very conservative with COVID, and we have another uptick, and we're predicted to get worse. And so I work at a health center. That's where my center is, and we have very strict rules that people, even if they're in person, have to be masked. So everybody's masked downstairs, but we let them go outside, and when you're outside, you don't have to wear a mask. So everybody's very happy today because they're outside in the sun. It's the first time we've seen this group face to face. So I so look forward to coming in April, and let's hope that I'm so tired of this virus, which I'm sure it's just echoing what everybody is saying. Yeah. But it's icky. All right, so if you wouldn't mind, 2 types of introductions. One, if you just tell me who you are and your program, and would you put it in the chat too, just when we do breakout groups. I think it will help us as we start doing that. So, Angie, I see you there. You want to, and thank you for all your help. So everybody knows all of you guys, Angie? Does everybody know you?
I think they should.
You're the backbone behind everything, right?
Absolutely.
All right, so I think I will, because you're on one of those, you know, Brady Bunch screens that keep moving, I'll try my best to just call you out, because otherwise everybody's going to jump in. So Molly?
Hi, everyone. I'm Molly Wheeler, and I am with ECI of North Central Texas with MHMR, and I am one of the regional directors.
Great. Thank you. All right. Anisha?
Hello, I'm Anisha Phillips, and I'm a Senior Director for our Early Childhood Intervention Program at My Health, My Resources of Tarrant County.
Where is that county? Because I don't have my map. I should have put a map so I could figure out where all you're from.
Well, Tarrant County is like North Texas, but we cover 12 counties in that area. Molly's one of the regional directors, so we work together.
I remember hearing about the North County the last time we were on as a large group. Thank you. Jesse?
Hi, Jesse Perez here. Easter Seals Central Texas, which is in Austin, and I'm an I'm EIS team lead.
Good, thank you. Joanne?
There's two Joannes here.
Oh
I'm
my gosh. You can go.
Left, I've been checking the other line. Hang on just a moment because I was returning.
Okay. I'm Joanne Huffstedler. I'm the director of LifePath Systems. And then the other Joanne is also with LifePath Systems if she wants to introduce herself.
Yes, I'm Joanne Borchert. I'm the program administrator for quality improvement.
Actually, we have three Joannes. So within your program, how do you two differentiate yourself? Are you like Joanne H and Joanne B?
Yep. There's a lot of the other Joanne and things like that.
The other Joanne. Okay, thank you. All right, Priscilla.
Hi there, my name is Priscilla and I'm a speech language pathologist with Easter Seals Rio Grande Valley, and that is in South Texas.
Okay, thank you. Stephanie?
Hi, I'm Stephanie Stiggins, and I'm one of the team coordinators and the lead early intervention specialist in Lubbock, ECI.
Okay, thank you. All right, Holly?
Hi, I'm Holly Grogan. I'm with Brighton Center in San Antonio, and I'm the Executive Vice President of Therapy Services.
Got it. Thank you. Cheney?
I'm Cheney. I'm with Early Childhood Intervention of LifePath Systems, and I'm a program administrator.
Thank you. All right, you guys, it's already started. People are moving around. So if how about the other Joanne, the third Joanne? Duffy.
I'm Joanne. I'm with Brighton Center in San Antonio, and I'm a regional manager with ECI, and I have no idea why the camera is not working, so sorry about that.
That's okay. So at least are you the only Joanne there?
Yes.
Oh, that's good. Thank you. Kelsey? I think she's gone, right? All right, Laura.
Oh, I was on mute, sorry.
Oh.
I am Kelsey Roski with the Helen Fairby Center, ACI in Wichita Falls, Texas, and I'm the EIS supervisor.
Got it. Thank you. All right, Laura.
Hi, I'm Laura Castillo. I'm with MHMR of Tarrant County as well, and I'm on the human resources side.
Thank you. All right, Rachel.
Hi, sorry about that. I had to get everything turned back on. I'm Rachel Phillips, and I am the lead for policy, Medicaid, and billing here at the ECI State Office. I've actually worked in a few different capacities, so if you haven't met me yet, you probably saw my name with a lot of EIS registry and credentialing, as well as some policy stuff. So it's nice to be here.
Good, thanks. All right, Tammy?
Tammy put in the chat that she had to step out for a phone call. She's the HHSC Interagency Coordinator and Outreach Team Lead, according to the chat.
Okie dokes. Thanks. Sandra.
Hi, I'm Sandra Ham. I'm a program administrator with ECI LifePath Systems.
Okay. And Sarah, the last on my screen. Video and mic are not working. Sorry, Sarah. Hope you can at least listen in so you can share. Well, this is great to get to see your faces and get to know you and see how widespread you are in the great state of Texas. I am going to share my screen, and I have an agenda that we certainly can adjust based on your needs, and a PowerPoint that I'm going to do for about the first half hour, maybe a little longer. But during the PowerPoint, I'm terrible at monitoring the chat. I would prefer you ask a question at the PowerPoint time, and I'm going to ask Chris, would you monitor the chat then? And you have my permission to interrupt me and just say, here's a good question about that, okay? So let me see if I can do the share. I'm also on my own very old laptop computer, which is what I drag around to different trainings for me. So give me a minute to make sure I can share the right thing. Okay, here we go. All right, so as I said, very outline-ish what we're going to do. I'm really going to kind of give you a little bit of an academic presentation, just some background on evidence-based practice, where it fits into professional development. Then we're going to talk about content for professional development, because so many times we sort of do reactive professional development. Somebody needs to know this, or we heard this person speak, or we'd like to see that model, without really looking at the bigger picture, which is how do we build competent staff and how do we build ourselves into competent leaders. And then we're going to talk about different methods. Take a break, and then you guys are going to get some directions on a make and take. We're going to talk about, and certainly I'd love to hear what you're currently doing, and then how we can start by developing targeted needs assessments. And then we'll do reporting out. Hopefully you'll be able to learn from each other, which I'm sure you will, and then next steps, okay? Is there anything that somebody would like to either put in the chat or put out there that you really want to get out of this next hour, and a little bit, not quite 2 hours we still have left? Don't be shy, you guys. So I'm going to get ready to start the PowerPoint, which
Those folks put it on the pre-survey. I could read a few off.
Sure, that would be great.
That was one of my questions. Unless people want to do it themselves. Here, I'm just pulling it up. Folks said how to target areas of professional development.
Good.
How to develop a good staff development program specifically for employee retention. How our programs can create and develop an assessment for the professional development.
Good. I think we should get around to those, but be specific when you have issues, challenges, or great ideas to share with each other, okay? So I'm going back to sharing. And now I have to find my PowerPoint. There we go. All right, now the problem is I have to move things around to get to the slideshow. All right, so this is just who I am. I have to move. The problem with a small laptop is that I have so many other things that block some of my view, but this is a quote that we use for the Early Childhood Personnel Center, which I direct. Working hard for something we don't care about is called stress. Working hard for something we love is called passion. And I think that all of you can, relate to me, which is what we do is passion. And that's why we want to find the most effective and efficient way to do it, because we don't need any extra stress in our lives, but we want to make sure that the work we're doing really matters, so that we feel that we are not just contributing to a family and child's well-being and quality of life, but we're contributing to our own self-efficacy of being able to do the job we love well. Oh, so now my thing doesn't work. There, whoops. Now I have to go back. Sorry, guys. All right. So this is just to get us all on the same baseline. Guys, let me just turn off my phone. Sorry. In regard to what we're looking for in early childhood. And I use early childhood intervention, even though I know you guys are Part C, early intervention, but it's gotten so awkward by separating the two systems of early intervention and early childhood special ed, that I really just group it all as anytime we're working with infants and young children. But for Part C or 619, as we talk the lingo of IDEA, These are the visions that I live by, the vision and values. We want equitable access for all children, for identification, screening, referral, and service provision, and we certainly know that's not happening in our country right now. Families are our partners. We know that. Natural environments and inclusionary practices are where we want to be providing services using inclusionary practices in natural environments. We work with cross-disciplinary teams, and we develop interagency relationships for collaborations for our children, because they certainly don't just work with our program, and their families are not engaged just with our program. They live in a community. The community has systems, and we want to make sure that we're assisting families to do what they want to do with the systems they want to interface with. So here's the million-dollar question, and this is a question that is not new. It's been here since probably 1960, when the first federal dollars came out to help prepare personnel in special education. And it came out under Dwight Eisenhower for teachers of the deaf and hearing impaired and visually impaired. It preceded any other funding for teacher training. There was more teacher training allocated through the Department of Ed through the 60s, and then 1976 when we had the Education of All Handicapped Children Act, which, you know, is our law that's now called IDEA. They built something called the Comprehensive System of Personnel Development as a component of getting special ed dollars into your state. You had to show how you were going to prepare personnel along a continuum. In 2004, they took that component out of IDEA, except in Part C, which you guys may or may not know, but it is so narrow in Part C, it is not at all a comprehensive system. But we really are still left with that question. Are personnel prepared, and are they supported? And looking at recruitment and retention, clearly, are they feeling supported enough to stay in the job? This is why it's so hard. This is a logic model I did a long time ago, not too long ago, maybe about 8 years ago, which really picked apart why is it so hard to have well-prepared personnel. If you look over, if you haven't done logic model, across the top is really just not just points in times, but points in a sequence. So the inputs are, you know, where are we starting? What's our baseline? What do we have? And we start with whatever state you're in, because IDEA is a state-run program. So your state characteristics, which includes your history, your values, what agency is lead agency, funding, training opportunities, service delivery, differs state by state. Secondarily, we know that the interventionists who we hire all have very different characteristics, starting with their own values and background. Their training, because we know different disciplines get very different training cultures in regard to what their vision is of their job, which gives you your self-efficacy. And I always use this as an example that many of our disciplines are trained and therefore licensed birth through death. And that's usually our therapists. So when you're looking at the training background of a therapist, it's wide and it's not necessarily deep in early childhood. But as another example, if you took somebody who had pediatric exposure, because they're not even getting really good training, but let's say clinical, you have a little bit more depth. And then if you take a discipline that only focuses, let's say on birth to 5, which some of our early childhood teacher training programs, early childhood special ed do, very deep, but not wide. So we have this very different vision of really lifespan, and yet we're being asked to work on a team and come up with a single vision. So we have to acknowledge that we're bringing a lot of differences to this input, skills and years experience. And then the children who we served. I mean, you can come up with 89 other characteristics that I just pulled out, but some of the more important ones are, you know, how long have they been enrolled in the early intervention? When did they get a diagnosis or demonstrated delay? What's the primary language, ethnicity, and race of the family? What are their family values? All of that needs to be taken into account. So you could just see there's not one size fits all before you look at what the state is doing to provide these services. And most importantly, what we want is states to be able to provide some type of personnel development that is comprehensive to all. There's the equity piece. But if you go down an activity as a child and family, participate in the IEP and IFSP, the staff and the state have to come up with really the model for how they're being trained and supported. Outputs, we hope, are that our personnel are receiving training to implement evidence-based intervention with fidelity across a variety of children and families and settings. And then what we want to see is the second box right down there, demonstrate the acquisition. So not just get the training, but are able to demonstrate it, and it can be measured that this practitioner is able to do this. So where does that leave us? That leaves us to effective delivery of evidence-based services. And down at the very bottom, where we're following the child and family across, each child demonstrates growth in development and behavior, more so than if they didn't get intervention. And that's our hardest thing to prove. But we used to prove it by lots of different ways of collecting data. But the most important reason you get into a family's life, which is a privilege, is because you're there to help that child do better than would be expected based on its diagnosis and characteristics. And I say that over and over because I just had a group of master's students, and they were fairly, I'll use the word complacent. Well, these kids have disabilities, so, because I was saying that you need to change an intervention program after 2 weeks if you see no growth, which, yeah, and they said, oh, no, these children have disabilities. It's going to take more than 2 weeks to show growth. I was like, then we're not measuring growth the same way. We're looking at increments of change and development because of the interventions you're helping a family provide. So if you look at the outcomes, which we have 3 outcomes, and usually any kind of systems change looks at basically proximal outcomes, what happens immediate, distal outcomes, and then the overall impact. Distal is like it might take a year or 2 to show. So under proximal is the 2 I just read now. The longer term, if you guys know your outcome data, those are our child outcomes that we measure for OSEP, kiddos under IDEA. We're measuring, do families know their rights? Do families effectively communicate their child's needs? And can families help their child develop and grow? Which is what our job is. Children have to demonstrate growth across positive social emotional, knowledge and skills, and appropriate behavior. But look at the very last impact. Systems, and so ECI systems, of which you are representing Texas, and higher ed programs are effective at changing personnel attitudes, knowledge, and skills. Our job is to help personnel be better, to have the attitude of high expectation, attitudes, natural environments, family partnerships, and then be able to demonstrate adequate knowledge and very, very important skills. And then the system and IHEs are effective at facilitating learning to improve children's developmental trajectory. That's the piece that is the hardest to prove, but that's why we're in this business, and that's why it's so complicated. So if you go all the way back to the beginning and you see all the variables that we don't have control over, you understand how hard it is to track all the way across to say this kiddo's outcome is because of good early intervention provided by a well-trained practitioner. Now, that doesn't mean we say, throw it up and say, oh my God, we'll never be able to do this. Well, I take this as the challenge that we're here to do, is to figure out for every child and family all of those variables and where do they line up. Because if you think of the child and family, if you think of the outcomes are what we measure, right, which is the dependent variable, and it is. Under IDEA, we have to do those measures, and we should be doing a very precise measurement for kids and families so you can track progress. So where does personnel fit in? Because if you think about it, except for Texas and this wonderful grant and all the work that you guys have done in personnel, many people jump to child and family outcomes. There has been so much attention, funding, and even training on outcomes. And I always say, you're doing it backwards. You can't get outcomes if you don't have personnel who are responsible for getting the outcomes well trained. It doesn't just happen through, train and hope or teach and hope. So if you think about it, we know the dependent variable is something you measure. So if you go think of this sentence, if child and family, and they are one things we measure, what are personnel? Are they the independent variable? Independent variable is the thing you manipulate, like I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna measure child and family. Or are they also a dependent variable? Because I'm doing this, personnel are. Is it a mediator, which basically in research just kind of talks about something that's going to change the trajectory of the dependent variable, or a moderator, which just is like it is, it moderates it, and or all of the above. And you can imagine that I wouldn't have all these up here if I didn't believe it's all of the above. And that's why personnel are so important, because at every step of interfacing with a family and a child, they are any of these and all of these. And to me, the most responsible for helping a child and family grow. So the conclusion is that your personnel can have powerful impact or not. And to have powerful impact, we go back to that really complicated logic model. We have to take into account and provide additional training. We have to help attitudes be shaped. We have to look at the experiences based on discipline, experience and training. We have to look at family characteristics and be much more precise about why this family might deserve, really, you know, it's really a deserve. It's not, they don't just get it, they deserve to have the best intervention that reflects their needs at any one point in time. And that's why our job is so hard, because families change, children change, but it doesn't mean we keep the same IFSP, or even worse, every kid's IFSP looks the same, because with all those different variables you can see, it's you know, it just amazes me sometimes when I look IFSP and they all look the same. It's like, who are these? You know, families are so different, just like each one of you here is so different. So the biggest challenge we have, besides doing some mechanics, which we're going to get into about what's the what and how, is really to understand our own attitudes about personnel, and to recognize that they are the most important commodity in the whole early intervention system. Probably more so important than administrators, but administrators are definitely the facilitator of good practitioners. But it's who is working with the child and family that's ultimately going to determine the outcomes for that child and family. Not even based on intensity or duration, but skill, knowledge, and attitude. And that's why personnel is obviously my passion, because I think we have an undertrained workforce. Quite frankly, we'll get into why, but more importantly, we don't acknowledge that our workforce is undertrained through no fault of their own. And instead, we just keep piling on more and more and more things on top of their, you know, what they have to do, either as service coordinators or managing large caseloads, or having 3 different autism type programs telling you the best way to work with this kiddo, having a different discipline person tell you, no, you're doing it wrong. And those are all things that I have experienced, seen, and know still happen, because, as I said, we right now are with administrators from the state of Connecticut, where I live, and I know what we're dealing with. We have to just change our attitude. We have to acknowledge that our most important part of the system are personnel, and what can we do to support the personnel. So we're going to start over with a simpler way of looking at a logic model. And this is primarily saying, and this is why I love working in Texas, we're working at state level, because states are the entity that the federal government is using to give funding, and for the state to turn in plans on what they're doing to serve all the children in Texas who qualify for Part C. But if states quality, we focus on, I'll get into what a CSPD looks like. If we have good personnel development, we know that EC leaders and practitioners, that's you guys, the leaders, and the practitioners have the requisite knowledge and skills. We're going to unpack that. What are the requisite knowledge and skills? If we have people who are well-trained as opposed to undertrained, we're going to see the improved effectiveness of services and supports, which will then improve outcomes. So you can't really do anything unless you hit that biggest box there. So let's go back to that question. Are they prepared and supported to do the job? So now I'm going to go through a number of different kind of tools that you guys can use, but really learning that I've had over the years. This is a CSPD scheme. CSPD didn't come out of our personnel center. It came out of, as I said, 94-142. We added the leadership, coordination, and sustainability. I believe in the systems as opposed to taking pieces, because you're never catching up if you take little pieces. So this has a very comprehensive view, starting with recruitment and retention. Who are we bringing into the field? How are we going to keep them there? Personnel standards, which I'll talk about in a minute. Pre-service and in-service and the linkages, which we'll also talk about. And then evaluation through everything. The reason I'm putting this up there is, even though we're going to talk about professional development, that is, if you even look at in-service up here, ongoing learning activities to maintain and build the competence of the EC workforce. The reason we say build as opposed to maintain is nobody comes out of even a graduate degree program knowing everything they need to know in regard to how to serve a child in a family where the child is identified with a delay or disability. So everybody needs to have that lifelong learning headset that we're always learning. So we're building our competence as we go. Same with administrators. We're building our competence all the time. We can't count on that. Pre-service training is the shortest amount of time we have on content across a lifespan. So picture it even yourself. You go to a 4-year program. Some of you may have come out like me with a special ed degree and right into special ed teaching. Many years ago, 1976 was my first year teaching. And then you go on and maybe get a graduate degree. And I spent 4 years, master's and doctoral, so there's 8 years of pre-service training. And 1976 was a long time ago. The rest of my life, I'm not considered in pre-service unless I take another degree. So most of our workforce, the bulk of their training is going to be at that in-service level and hopefully job embedded. We can't count on pre-service meeting every single need that a future practitioner has because of, and I have I mentioned a master's degree program, you just can't get everything packed in. And when you do, it's not the best kind of learning because you're doing it under a timeline of a semester. So we really do need to build that linkages, and that's what we're going to talk about, is how we link pre-service standards in service practices, because they have to align. And many times we see systems that aren't aligned at all. In-service kind of takes on a life of its own, and pre-service does what their accreditation tells them they need to do. And again, to me, I'm always wanting efficiency. You want these links to happen. So the other thing we're going to talk about that we have done through early childhood personnel, in the day when I was trained as a special educator, I had the life to kind of, in those days it was, birth to 22. And our kind of vision is that we could take a job in any school, any type of kiddo, because we were taught broad. Everybody should be able to do everything for every kiddo, okay? We have become more sophisticated, thank goodness, and we realize that we have to differentiate because it's a waste of time to train everybody to do the same thing. So while all early childhood personnel need to have competence in all, and I have another slide which tells you how we deal with this, all infants and young children, we look at the NAEYC standards, which are for good early childhood practice. Then you have a need for kids with various risk and challenging behaviors, among other trauma kiddos. You need early childhood personnel with specialized and advanced training, maybe specific just to behavior, and we have a whole new category, ABA, BCBAs, which unfortunately have kind of like superseded the number of teachers who are being trained. I think they're great, but what they should be doing is sharing some of their wisdom, and it shouldn't just be one size again. But that's a perfect example. Infant mental health specialists, okay? Another example where you have some specialists who come in to work specifically with kiddos who you have specific needs. We have one of our participants had a baby early. She was, and last night, this is why I love this field. She sends myself and our other coordinator an email saying she apologizes that she can't be at the training today, but she wanted us to know her good news. Her baby came a month early last week. And then she goes on to tell us he was in NICU. He's still in the NICU. Today's the first day he's getting some of his tubes taken out, so she's going to be able to hold him for the first time. And she writes in this email, so I hope you understand why I'm not going to be with you. And I hope you can Zoom the whole meeting, so I'll watch it when I go home. And I'm really apologizing. And I'm like, oh my goodness, you have a new baby. Do not worry about us. But again, as a field, she's just wonderful. But when we look at babies like she's going to take home, you might not need a full therapist. You could have a home visitor. You could have a nursing service. There's different types of personnel who are better at different types of a child's life. It's the tippy top that we do need to train in specialized supports. And those are those of us who work with kids who are qualifying for IDEA. But then again, there's also, and you guys all know this because I remember your last time, some program who needed training for feeding. Not everybody needs to be an expert at feeding, but you do need to have your specialists. So you're not in this state, I hate to even say our long state, there's a waiting list to get kiddos evaluated for feeding because there's only one place at the other side of the state that kind of has a monopoly. They're very good, but you want to have that capacity within your program, and that's just one example. But it doesn't mean that everybody needs to have everything, and I'm putting that out there because when we talk about needs assessment and content, that's what I want you to think about is, what's your program able to do for each child and family, which is individualized. Because the bottom line is we need to know are we making an impact. So evidence-based practice, that's something we bandy about. We've been saying it since 2004. IDEA had it in it. It was scientifically based practice. So did No Child Left Behind. And evidence-based practice, it is something that we do need to take serious. It means we're not just shooting from the hip. But on the other hand, we do a lot of practices that probably are not grounded in research or data. So evidence-based primarily is saying that the characteristics of an intervention will have an outcome, okay? This is in a kind of behavioral terms. Characteristics produce consequences. The process within can be changed many different ways for different consequences. All this is saying is it's complicated. It's complicated. You cannot answer with one thing. So what are evidence-based practices? Practices with the best evidence of what works. Okay, we even have a what works clearinghouse in the federal government, and have been classified as such through a formal evidence-based review. This is in really the best case scenario. Now, the reason I say that is because sometimes we provide training. And I'll give you an example. In Connecticut, they're getting training in in a technique. And they were telling me it's evidence-based. We've been told it's evidence-based. I said, have you looked at the evidence? Now, these I can do. These folks are taking the class with me. Have you looked at the evidence? No, we were told. And I said, what's the evidence about? Well, this works. And I said, works with who? What type of kids? Oh, I don't know if the evidence is there. It's evidence works that people can use this interviewing technique. So I said, but then does it have an outcome? Like does it have an outcome for every family? Who's measuring the outcome? We're not doing that. We get kind of sloppy, and I say that because we have a lot to do, and we sometimes trust, and I'm not saying we shouldn't trust, but sometimes we trust without really looking deep. Is this the best match for this family? So for example, this one technique is probably not going to work as well with a 15-year-old who lives in our inner city of Hartford, who had a baby, who lives with a guy who is dealing drugs, and her father is in jail. That type of early intervention is not going to use a specific technique that might work with a middle-class family whose both parents have at least high school, some college, and are able to read. So, you have to do those differentiations as you're looking, and that means your practitioners, you can't just send practitioners out with a caseload of 10 very different families without assuring that they feel confident about which strategy they're going to use with which family. And sometimes all it takes is let's listen to the family before we figure anything else out and see who's best match. But when we look at evidence-based practices, we're looking at research designs, which are on the at the top, are usually experimental. It's gold standard. We don't have enough research in birth to 5 at all. a lot of times we use single subjects, but the quality has to be, and these are the kinds of things you want to be able to look up. The description of the context and the setting, the participants, the intervention, and the practice. Where did this data come from? Fidelity, and then internal validity. Was it done well? And was there outcome measures with data analysis? And you're looking not just at one time that it was used. You want quality practices, and you want to see positive and meaningful effects, not just, I got this done. So this is complicated, right? I mean, not everybody's going to sit down before they go and visit a family and say, oh, let me go back and find a journal, or luckily you guys, your generation, you have Google Scholar. All you have to do is type in a name or a content and you're going to get a journal article. But the bottom line is most of us don't have time in our lives to do that. It's not to say to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are ways to get this data before you're doing anything specific. National Research Council way back when, and this is what really became part of IDEA 2004, significant questions that can be answered empirically, linking research to theory, methods, direct investigation, coherent and explicit chain of reasoning, replicating and generalizing across studies, and making sure that people are going through peer review. Again, this is not your job, but your job is to be a good consumer so you can ask the right questions before. So one of my folks downstairs just said to me, and I'll just say this because I think that your state would feel the same way. So if I have a concern about something I'm being told to do, can I ask a question? And I was like, yeah, that's a mature adult would ask a question. So that's what I want you guys to do before you jump into any one type of PD or one type of practice. Ask the questions about which type of kiddos. This is just examples of where you can get linkages to find evidence-based practices. But here's the most important piece of this. Evidence is not value-free. You can talk to two different people who are going to interpret the data two different ways, which is why you want multiple replications. And there's no universal solutions. So many times people are going to jump at the easiest solution. So this person's going to come in and says they'll train my whole staff to do this. That sounds great. I don't have to worry about it. I can pay them some money and we're going to be good. It doesn't usually happen that way. And you really do need to figure out that there isn't a quick fix or a universal solution. If somebody offers you that,
Hi, Julie. Hello. You making the rounds?
all right. Keep going, or was there a question? All right. Evidence is often incomplete, and evidence is quite complex. All right. So if I'm overwhelming you, I apologize, but I want you to walk away thinking what we're teaching our practitioners to do should be questioned for each family and child. All right, so this was a metasynthesis we did on evidence-based practice in adult learning, which is, this is if we're going to teach our adults, which are practitioners, anything, this is what works. Basically, whoever is teaching, an explicit explanation and an illustration. I'm going to share with you a website in a little while that will show you this, of the specific content knowledge and the practice to be learned. You can't just talk about it, and you can't just show videos about it. You want to be able to talk and show and talk and show, because you want to have active and authentic job embedded opportunities. It's how we all learn. We learn best multiple ways. Then we want to basically have different types of practices for engaging practitioners in reflection on their understanding. This sound familiar? Different practitioners learn differently, just like our families have different needs. So you can't just provide everything online and then wonder why some people are so good and some people are not so good at learning it. Some people are not good online learners. You can't just give everybody something to read. Again, some people are not visual learners. You really need to be able to have people spend time in their own mode reflecting on what they're trying to do and the mastery of it. Coaching, mentoring, performance feedback, that means a development specialist who is really doing a lot of, we call it both antecedent and follow-up supports. You know, this is what I want you to do. Either watch me, just like we're teaching a child to do things by modeling. Watch me, give me feedback, I'll give you feedback. Really having a dialogue, it's practice. It doesn't come through osmosis. Ongoing follow-up supports by professional development folks, could be a variety of folks, including peers, and then sufficient duration and intensity. So many times, I'm sure you guys in your lifetime have been in a lot of one and dones, right? I go to this lecture and now I'm expected to implement this. Some people think that's what PD is, and we know it's not. So you want to be able to have some type of follow-up. And then I think most importantly, what we have also learned, the more complex the change in behavior you want of an adult, the more time you need doing active teaching, just like we do with kids. So where does this fit in? Back to the pre-service and service. So we're gonna now move into content. So what are we gonna teach? Who are we gonna teach? I'm gonna go over 3 different content areas for differences you may want and show you how you can design your own. One will be for interdisciplinary teams. One will be for the general EI, ECSE, and one will be for administrative leadership training. And these are standards and competencies that I have developed through a number of these and in collaboration with lots of people. So we're going to talk about competencies, standards, and leadership competencies. The standards are aligned with all these competencies. So the difference between a competency and a standard, it's usually language. That's all it is, because they can look very similar. The issue is anything that has a standard behind it usually designates that it's enforceable. Okay, so the ECSE standards are going to be enforceable by our CAPE accreditation, which goes into universities and colleges and says if you have an early childhood special ed program and you want to be accredited by us, you're going to meet these standards. But we're going to start with the cross-disciplinary because they're kind of fun. We had been working for a long time, like 7 years, with all the professional organizations. And the issue that came out is not just for PD, but can we get a common language across all our disciplines? So we had this group of disciplines, okay, and they really were agencies and organizations, but ASHA, AOTA, PTA, 0 to 3, NAEYC, DEC, CEC. And we started by, and we have a whole methodology. I don't think I put the methodology in here. Yeah, some of it is here. We had a stakeholder group, which each organization sent a practitioner and an officer in their program and somebody from their professional office. The stakeholder group drafted core areas and sub areas they think what every early childhood interventionist should know across disciplines. So you can imagine everybody gave up a little bit of their territory. What we ended up doing, though, to assure everybody that we were going to keep to practice standards, is we did an alignment of all personnel standards and practice documents across all those disciplines. So we have huge spreadsheets. Then we aligned and characterized them into specific competency areas. We then came up with definitions that everybody could live with, and then we did observable, measurable competencies. And then each one of those wonderful organizations board endorsed these. So these have an endorsement behind them. This is what it looks like. I'm going through them fast, but I'll tell you where you'll be able to find them. Each one, let's go back here. These are the 4 areas that came out: family-centered, evidence-informed, evidence-based, coordination, collaboration, and professionalism. So this definition was adopted by all of these organizations. And you can imagine the wordsmithing, but it's culturally competent and family responsive early childhood intervention that respects and facilitates families' active partnership. Nothing different than what you guys would, I think everybody would agree on this. This is not controversial. It's putting it down in writing. Families' active partnership, participation in assessment, planning, implementation, and monitoring. Okay? And the indicators look like this. And this is not a needs assessment, but we have used it as a needs assessment. It can be used by program administrators. It can be used at the pre-service level, supervising practicum, which is where I use it. And in this area, these are not specifically defined. They can be defined by a program administrator or anybody in terms of to what extent you want this. But as an example, can somebody use effective communication with families across cultural, linguistic, and socioeconomic backgrounds? And we're going to add educational backgrounds. That's both listening, speaking, and writing. starting with the partnership, all the way down to, this is a lot of service, what we hope service coordinators doing, referring families to resources and services to help them meet the needs of their child, and provide information to the family about parental rights and safeguards. So there's a meaty group of indicators here that again, were endorsed to say these are competencies. Coordination and collaboration, which also spills into service coordination, but clearly our service providers. Alignment of intervention services, interventions, and community resources to support collaborative, cross-disciplinary, and cross-agency service delivery. So this is the building of systems. And there is overlap. You can see effective communication. If you're going to be able to do this, you need to have effective communication. And what we have here, a lot of service agencies. But we also have demonstrates negotiation skills with service providers and agencies to problem solve. Demonstrates leadership at meetings. So we really are putting, in order to be a good collaborator, this is what you have to do. Evidence-based practice, which I just went over, but it's primarily that scientifically based evidence should inform all screening, assessment, intervention, and evaluation practices. Monitor, make decisions, and collection of reliable data. Everybody should be collecting data. Here is the list. Again, it's not discipline specific on purpose because every discipline has items similar to this. And lastly, everybody, I'm happy, wanted professionalism and ethics. Application of ECI and discipline-specific laws, policy, ethical standards, practice guidelines by all service providers who take responsibility for continued learning through self-reflection, professional development, which they share with others, which teaching, mentoring, coaching, demonstration. You guys are demonstrating this competency by being here because you are taking your own responsibility and then you're going to be able to translate it. All right. This has a whole list of different things, including awareness of other disciplines, practice guidelines, and standards. So you know what's within a practice guideline. Learns from, with, and about all team members with an interprofessional collaborative practice framework, meaning it's another way of saying transdisciplinary, which is not used by our therapies. They're using interprofessional collaborations. Mentors, teachers, and provides performance feedback. This is really one that we align with leadership. So that's one group of practices that reflect these 4 areas. We have definitions that you can pull down. Second group is these personnel standards. This was done in collaboration with Division for Early Childhood, CEC. They are now not DECs, they are CECs, Council for Exceptional Children. 7 practice standards, which is what universities have to meet, just like in early childhood, CAPE has 7 practice standards. These are the areas. When I'm done with this, before I'm done with this, I'll bring you to a website which breaks these down into components. Again, why is this important? We hope that people at the pre-service who are studying an EI or ECSE are receiving training, support, skill building in these areas and the components underneath it. But we cannot even pretend that this is all going to be taught to mastery at a 4-year degree for sure, even at a 2-year. So this, we feel, and DEC feels, should really be the continuum of what we want our practitioners to be able to do. So this is a needs assessment we did with the state of Iowa. We actually broke down the recommended practices, aligned them with the standards, and did a needs assessment for the whole state of Iowa. We are now doing a needs, it's not a needs, it's a state of the state for early childhood special educators across the country. We're doing it with NEAR, which is out of Rutgers, and we're using these areas to ask people how well they were trained in these areas and what more training they'd like, because this is going to be our framework. We have curriculum modules I'm going to share with you that you can use with your staff that follows our evidence-based PD, starting with an illustration, topics and PD guides, sample syllabi, multimedia, which is all kinds of videos, learning activities to help your staff learn these, and then resources that you can use. We have that for the cross-disciplinary too. So these are available, and I'm going to share with you, but this is the content of where you're going to start. Then we have a leadership partnership, and we spent, this is a long methodology, we spent 2 years on this with all C and 619 state coordinators. We started by asking them what do they do and what do they need to know in order to do it well, okay? We came up with critical knowledge and skills. We did 2 focus groups. We had every state involved at some level. We did a survey nationally for people to come up with a consensus. We did focus groups then with the consensus. I mean, this was really an iterative process. And right now we are in our 2nd cohort of teaching these. So this came into multiple curriculum and I mean multiple iterations. We have the competencies, which I'll share some. We have a self-assessment, learning opportunities also we have available. We are utilizing peer and expert mentoring because we will, the bottom line, since folks named Joyce and Showers, who started doing research on coaching in the late 70s, early 80s, came up with the brilliance of saying schools are never going to have, they did school age, schools are never going to have enough money to hire a coach for every teacher, nor, I take it down to early childhood. Therefore, we have to take responsibility ourselves to help coach each other. And so we're using that model with this curriculum. And then we have acquisition and then final projects. So this is not as dark as I wish it was. I'm sorry, you guys. But this is our leadership curriculum, which has been vetted and it was refined again last summer by our CN 619 folks. Starting with self-knowledge under foundational leadership skills, ethics and professionalism, laws, regs, and then early learning and pedagogy. Then the 2nd level is operational leadership, communication and collaboration, and then the actual program management, what kind of skills. In fact, we have Maureen Greer downstairs while I'm up here talking to our group downstairs on part of this curriculum, which is the program management. Then we go into strategic leadership, which is how do you lead others, strategic thinking and planning, systems change, and then people do a systems change project because we believe in embedded job. So each one of these sections, and they were done in a hierarchy, first being you have to know yourself and you have to know your competencies and the areas that you still want to get more teaching, training, learning opportunities before you can talk about next basic foundation, which is your ethics. How do you do ethics and professionalism? Then what are the laws telling you? And then what's early learning all about? So this is how we have it. Each area has a module, has a specific outcome. So this is develop and implement a professional development plan to guide the acquisition of leadership goals. This was the hardest thing, and I'm sure you guys could relate. Leadership differentiated from, let's say, management goals, or let's say even practitioner pedagogy goals. We want you to be a leader. Therefore, you're writing your own professional plan. This is the self-knowledge, which we do start off with the history and knowledge, but then we talk about personal values, professional development, learning communities, use of data reflection and collective input. So it's pretty meaty. This is the strategic thinking. This is an example of when we get into the last part of it. A system need, like 324, a system need and program need for the service system. How to facilitate stakeholders to come up with a shared vision, collective mission. This is a lot of strategic planning in this tier. Then we go into scaling up. So it's pretty specific, but this also, we have a needs assessment that's done on this that you can use for your leaders, your team leaders, yourselves. And then we have a resource library that you can get things for, or we're doing teaching. What we're finding is most people, and maybe it's COVID, maybe it's not, maybe it's just because we're humans, we like doing this interactive. And a lot of our folks are liking doing it more interactive than giving them things online. So next, we're almost done, so we can just chat a little bit. We have tools, and I'm going to get on the ECPC website because remember I talked to you about the evidence-based professional development kind of metasynthesis that we did. We've turned those into tools for a trainer or instructor to use. So you can talk about what are you going to do and what are you going to teach to the adult learners. And we have samples so people can get in there and figure out, this is child authentic assessment. How are you going to share that? And what are the which video, we even have hot links. So we have a lot of those that can be used. We also have technical assistance because you can't do training without, some people call it technical assistance, some call it follow-up, to just talk about how we're doing around providing specific help or assistance. And this is one of our action plan reviews, which we use to make sure that everybody's action plan has met all the specific, does it meet values, does it meet ethics, is it feasible, is it measurable, and is the time appropriate. because we really want, and this is specific to a CSPD, but you can adapt it. So here we are, probably longer than I wanted to speak, and probably you guys all get pats on the back. If I was near you, I'd give you M&Ms. And I mean M&Ms not as a reinforcer, M&Ms because you need some chocolate to keep going. This is really just to give you a baseline, but this is where we're at. It's not a quick fix. PD is very complicated if you do it well. It's not something we can say, I'm just going to check off the box. It's really acknowledging each one of those who you supervise or you provide mentorship to, or you really serve, because when you look at kind of servant leadership, that's really what we do. You look at each one of those people as an individual, and you do your individual professional development plan, which I know you're all doing it, but sometimes we kind of get lost because there's so much out there, and we need to come up with a vision of what do we want for our program, for our state, and how are we going to provide the tools to allow people to do it. So this is an example of Hawaii. Yes, I got to go to Hawaii, and as I tell people, especially during COVID, because I was so grumpy about it, I went for 5 days thinking, oh, I'm going to go back to Hawaii, and I spent 4 days with this wonderful team. And then Ted Burke drove me around for 1 day. But they did a wonderful, basically broken, developed their vision, which we have on our website, but it's rolling up your sleeves time. It's really working hard, coming up with they had this wonderful whiteboard. They had a room just full of whiteboards. Their goals, their objectives, where they're going to pull things. Because in order to make a difference to the children and family you are serving, you want to make a difference to those practitioners and the administrative structures, which starts with you. And the way we know things work is look at your vision, your goal, and then break it down. So this is the group that we worked with, and it took 4 days, and it also took about a year of pro planning. So don't think you're going to walk out of here today, I hope nobody would anyway, and say, I got a PD plan for my staff. No. You need to do some basic needs assessment of yourself. Where do you feel your staff is now? Where do you want to be, and what do you need to do? And so going forward, the next steps, you really want to start at the beginning. Define your evidence-based practices. What do you need to know to do your job well? So those practices can come from, I just gave you 3 areas, and they could come from others. One could be the cross-disciplinary competencies. Another could be the EIECSE standards. Another could be for your leaders, the leadership curriculum. But have your universe, because otherwise if you have a wide open universe and you're not using any kind of filter, you're never going to feel good about the PD you're doing, because there's always more to do. But if you had a plan and each person knew where they were on a hierarchy of what they need to learn, and you would have maybe some larger initiatives, and you might have some very specific initiatives to specific personnel who identify, I need to know how to position this kid better, or I need to know how to work with this very young mom who I don't even talk the same language of, and not in terms of English language, but just they talk a different way. We were just talking downstairs. Any of you are much younger than me, and I have young kids because my girls I was very lucky to adopt as an old mom from China. And I was saying my 16-year-old never gets off TikTok. And they were the group downstairs was saying, we need to get on TikTok to meet our family's needs, because that's what they're on now is TikTok. Nobody reads Twitter, nobody looks at anything else but TikTok. Anyway, so you need to know what your staff needs, how they learn best, learning inventories, we do that all the time, as well as content analysis of, in this hierarchy, where do you rate yourself? And then where do you rate how do you want to learn? Who's your target population? Not everybody, as I said, needs to know everything. You need to take your staff as the commodity they are. They are your values. I mean, they are the value that you bring to families and kiddos. You want to make sure that you are valuing them enough to help them get the skills. And then a needs assessment has to be done before you do any PD. How do you document knowledge and skills of you and your staff? And it doesn't always have to be paper, pencil, or Qualtrics on the computer. It can be focus group. It can be interviewing everybody individually with not an interview, but just let's chat. What do you think? And then building a plan. You've got to have a plan, not just trainings, okay? So I'm gonna break first for any questions, and then I think we need a break, and then come back, and I'm gonna share with you just some places you can find things, and then put you to work, knowing what time it is. Is there any questions, Chris, in the chat?
Not that I've seen, but if folks have questions, feel free to put them in the chat or just shout them out right now.
If not, you guys need a break from the screen. Absolutely. So let's do 10 minutes, and then we're going to finish in a fast 40 minutes. We might not get through everything, but I'll leave tools for you, okay? Thank you, Joanne, for processing. So let's do 10 minutes. Make sure you're off camera, rest your eyes, stand up, stretch, get something to drink. All right, you guys, we may not get through everything in terms of their planning, but maybe it can fold into the plan that they're doing with you guys.
Yeah, I think that we might have moving, you know, in a month or so, maybe just you can meet with a small group of folks who might have some questions once they've started to really get into their action plans.
That would be fine. Yeah, that would be fine. All right, you guys, I'm going to stand. Okay.
Yes, please do. We'll be right back.
All right, everybody. Can we assume you're on? If you were here, I'd be afraid that you would have taken a walk outside, but since I know you're in 100+ weather, I'm sure you're not taking a walk outside. I'm going to share with you one more thing before we possibly go into groups, because I don't want to not have you know where this is. So let me share screen. All right, everybody see that cute little baby girl? This is the Early Childhood Personnel Center resources, and that's what I want you to know in regard to how to find content. So you can go under resources here, and there's all kinds of evidence-based practice guides and things that you can do by audience: families, higher ed faculty, Part C and State B staff. Staff includes PD staff, okay? And you could either do it that way, or you can go right into specific things. We have e-learning lessons and videos. We have literature data reports. We have a video library. The video library is something that we did for illustrations of the different specific areas that we had in cross-disciplinary. So you could pick a specific area, like you want to do something on assessment, and knowing what we know about people's, let's just say, growing up with Khan Academy, which is short YouTube kind of videos. These are not long, sit down for half an hour. And let's say if you want to go to Authentic, it will have the specific description, the citation, the length, what standard it meets, and what recommended practice it meets. So you can sort by practice and standard in assessment. And there's lots and lots of great short videos for illustration. And you can get into all the different topical areas here. Teaming has a whole bunch. And as you can see, they're broken down to different categories. So that's a tool to use when you choose what's the content you're going to focus on. Now, other resources. Under the cross-disciplinary competencies, which is the first thing I showed you with the 4 areas, all down here, there are the competency indicators, which can be used as a self-assessment or an assessment. We have alignments. We have a user guide on how to use the specific indicators with 4 case studies. So a case study, let's do evidence-based practice since I've used that word a lot. You can download it, and it is annotated for you and for whoever you want to use. If it opens up. Slow go here. So the case study has what indicators your, kind of your objectives. Over here, a discussion about these indicators and also resources to use, so all hot linked here. So there's the case study, and then there are questions that can be used and specific resources. So they're very much a self-study community practice, just each one of them. They're quite lengthy, as you can see. So that's some resources for cross-disciplinary. Uh-oh, I bet you if I get out of this, I'm gonna lose my, let's see. Maybe not. Good, all right, so there's the library. So the other thing that you can do, wait a second. As I said, I have too many things, as you can see on my screen. That's not, maybe you can't see. If you go into IHE, well, actually, we'll go to curriculum modules. These are referencing the EI ECSE standards. That was the second area that I shared with you, the second way of doing it. So if you, any one of these, this explains what we have in each one: topics, sample syllabi, learning activities, practicum, PD guides, multimedia, resources, and different ways. So if in fact you were going to do a needs assessment of your staff and you were going to use these, now I told you they're all broken down. So under partnering with families as an example, it describes what it is and then the different components. So each component has a different piece, as you can imagine. But that's what we usually use as a needs assessment, is the component plus the standard. And then you can get into, if in fact you were going to do it, or a PD person, right into the topics that's covered. Well, they're matched to the components, so I don't have to go into that. But here's what they should learn and be able to do. And we give more specific components that are foundations and what a learner who's mastered this are able to do. So it really breaks it down for teaching purposes, but also for analysis. Then we have sample syllabi. Not that any of you are going to teach a course, but we made it easy for each component. And we give this is activities that go along with the syllabi, the learning activities. Sample syllabi are hooked together. So you can have learning activities for each one. And then we have a PD guide is a PowerPoint already done for you with these. And so you could get a PowerPoint on family-centered practice and the facilitator's guide. And then back to videos, because we tied a video pretty specifically to each component then. Oops. So you can go into the component and get the video that's specific to the component. So we tried to make this easier for folks, knowing as I started out how complicated PD is. The leadership, which I shared at the end, will have its own drop-down, hoping by the end of the summer, with all those resources too. Now, our advice to people is to use these as tools, but not to use these as the solution. That there are multiple ways that people can use them. Self-study, you could say, oh, I want to go back and look at a picture of Authentics assessment. I need to see it. Or one of your staff could come to you and say, you know, I'm not quite sure. I've done one, or I know one, and you can say, here's a resource, go look at it, and then let's discuss. That's the issue people are forgetting, is that you can't, you know, some people, sure, go look at it and they've got it. But as a leader, you want to take the time to assure them that they've got it, because that's giving them the reinforcement and self-efficacy, and you know that they've got it. There's multiple, I think there's altogether like 23 different areas in here that you can drill down into. But the point of this is, find your first step, which is, what do my staff need? Like, what do I think the universe? Do I want to focus more on these cross-disciplinary indicators, which overlap, by the way? And in fact, let me see if I'm lucky if I can find this. It is we have crosswalks of all of these, and I don't know where my crosswalks went. No, let's see. These are all behind walls, but we can do it. Let's see if we can do, it's under faculty. Let me just bring up faculty for a second. So these are all, and we have the same kind under here, grant writing. I don't have the crosswalks. I will find all of these are crosswalked together, and it's a pull down that you can do. I didn't show you these. These are more specific, longer courses. So we have e-learning courses too on specific topics. Over here, naturalistic instruction, everyday learning, interest-based, practice guides that go with it. So these are all tied again to the work that we did. So back to what my advice is. My advice is use this as a tool, but not as your sole PD focus. What you want to be able to do is you use this as a tool. If you go down the front page, we have, you can click on each one of these and get examples. And we also have by audience down here. And we have resource maps, by the way, if you want to know what personnel standards are and where higher ed programs are. So there's lots that you can use as a leader. And that's my advice, is that people can self-select, but as a leader of an early intervention program, you want to have a PD plan that's comprehensive, individualized, allows for differentiation of both skill level and skill topic among your staff, because otherwise, you know, people will be overwhelmed and they'll never do, you know, get anything. But you also want to meet the needs of your children and families first. That should be your first step. We don't have a lot of time, but I do want, Chris, do you think we can do, he's going to be our magician, to put people in groups? And I'll stop sharing for a second. As you can see, it's ecpcta.org. It's pretty darn easy to get in there. So what I'm going to give you, I'm looking at my time, is basically, let's see if we can get you dialoguing for about 15 minutes. And how many people are there? There's about 16 people, 17? I'd say groups of 4, 3 or 4. You're going to be randomized. And I think you can discuss, what do you think makes sense for Texas, your state system, and then your own local system? As where would you start? Starting with my question, what's your universe? Who do you want to target? And then find out, who do you need to assess on what? And what are you going to tie it to? We don't want to tie it to, I'm going to use the word even though we're providing support, you want to, trauma informed. Everybody's doing trauma informed. 2 years ago it was social emotional. Everybody's doing social emotional. That's perfectly fine, but not every child is on the same level and needs that. You know, you have a child who has medical needs. That parent needs social emotional. You know, what you want to be able to do is be able to put it into a long-term vision of how to build a competent workforce. All right, we ready, Chris?
Absolutely.
All right, you guys. So let's just do 15 minutes. And just let's see if you can start the dialogue. We won't have that much time coming back because I have a hard stop at 4, my time, 4. And, but we can start the dialogue, see what needs to be continued, and see if it at least gives you an idea of how you can use some of these tools, or at least gives you a different picture of what PD could be like.
Before I press go, can I get a thumbs up from everyone that you understand what your task is for the next 15 minutes? Or if you have any questions.
And at this point, it can be very unstructured. I just want you to rethink PD and think about it in a different way.
All right.
Hi, Angie again.
Hi, Molly.
Again.
So this would probably be more discussion between the two of you.
Why is that?
Oh, I'm not working directly with ECI, so I'm just, doing like the administrative work here.
Gotcha.
We had a meeting this morning just going over our retention plan. So I got to meet Angie then and spill my guts, I guess, as you would say.
That's good.
Yeah. Do you
So-
want to start?
I'm Joanne. I'm with Early Childhood Intervention at Life Path Systems. I'm the PA for quality improvement, and we are in the north Dallas, from North Dallas up to Oklahoma.
Very good. Okay. Yeah. I am Molly Wheeler. I'm one of the regional directors at the ECI in Fort Worth. So we're neighbors, Joanne.
Oh yeah, we are.
Yeah. So yeah, I'd like to say, I guess my region of the, our program is so large, is the Southwest area of Fort Worth. So that's kind of where I'm located. But I oversee, 5 supervisors that oversee about 10, 11 staff. And so I'm just trying to make sure everything runs well. We have been doing a lot on staff retention, but training. So professional development, all of that. So this is good timing, but
yeah,
we have been definitely trying to put forth more effort to make sure our especially new hires, are feeling supported and have several mentors and know who to contact, and really just kind of listening and reflecting, because a lot of what she said, them not feeling prepared. I've gotten a lot of feedback on that. And so we're trying to figure out how to support them to know that they're not going to know everything, and that's okay, but also feel prepared enough to walk into a home and listen to a family,
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a whole new world, I think, after COVID, trying to hire. It's never been as difficult. People have never been as demanding. And honestly, it's just been a kind of a quirky, that's really nothing in particular, but we've just had kind of an influx of new staff for a long time of being very stable. We've had an influx of new staff. And since, like I said, it is a new world after COVID, and a lot of them, like a couple of them that we hired, one of them decided to go back to grad school right away, so then she dropped out. Another one had already been accepted to a PhD program. I think she just didn't want to tell us and wanted to work for the summer, so then she left. So it's been a lot of like weird things we've never experienced before when it comes to hiring. And so I agree with you. In some of those exit conferences with new staff, we've had like 2 or 3 leave. One just because her husband was transferred, but one of the things that they did say was that, they got a caseload early, quickly, and just trying to support them through that with enough supervision and like you said, kind of peer support, sort of trying to, make sure that they felt like they had enough training to do their job, and ongoing as well as just onboarding kind of training. So I guess this comes at a good time, definitely, but it's almost sad that it comes when we've all find out that we have a budget cut for next year, or, and it's exciting to think about doing extra training and to having not maybe not extra, but even more focused training. But it's like, oh, well, okay. I'm not sure how we're going to do all that with the time and the resources that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've put in a lot more focus on listening and really trying to take feedback from new hires, especially, but some of our other staff definitely can give good input. I also wonder, because of COVID, how many trainings are virtual and how easy it is to kind of tune out those trainings. So just kind of thinking about, I've been to some trainings that are so interactive, you cannot tune them out. And I'm like, we need to make every single training that we have as interactive as possible. Because I think it's easy to check out and then you didn't get anything from that training and it was your nutrition training. And now you have a kiddo that has nutrition needs and you just went to a training to give you at least a starting point, so I do wonder about that. I mean, we are trying to, like, at least within our MHMR agency, they're doing our new hire training in person, which is great. But a lot of our ECI specific trainings are still virtual. And, I think it really is just changing them up a little bit to be more interactive, not to say we need to come back in person, because you're right over there, it's getting worse again. So
it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Not to say we need to change virtual at all, but to make it more interactive and in groups like this, like take it, you really have to talk and you have to regurgitate information you've heard. And I do think it's beneficial, but I think it's more focusing on how we're training, and feedback is always important for sure.
Yeah. Laura, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Hi, Laura.
Hi. Sorry, I had to step out a bit to take a call, but so I'm on the HR side, on Molly's team as well. But it's kind of a whole new world. Here we've focused a little more on like DEI projects, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So part of that, they're working on stay interviews as well as exit interviews to kind of get feedback from staff regarding their time and kind of early on. So we can kind of get an idea of what's occurring and keep people employed. And then as far as recruiting, we've added more recruiters, so they're working on filling positions, but we are a large agency, so that's kind of a challenge as well.
We've done all of our onboarding, I will say, with the exception of the links for training that they have to do on the website. We have done all of our training face-to-face for new staff. But compared to the rest of the state, we're big, but compared to Tarrant County, I know we're not as big as you all, but so we might not have as many. And like I said, we really have not had a problem retaining staff and not had a lot of open positions, but it just seems like we had a slew of them there for a little while. And we were able to do those face-to-face, but for the rest of the staff, we've just been, it's like we get back to doing our monthly staff meeting where there's always at least some of it is training. We just get to the point where we're starting to do those face-to-face, and then another wave of COVID hits and everyone kind of goes back to, and I think, we talk a lot about morale on COVID meetings. Is it morale? Like, why is nobody really talking a lot? And I really think it just comes down to, over the last 2 years, everyone's gotten very good at multitasking on COVID that you can't do when you're sitting in a meeting with everyone looking at you. And I don't think it's morale as much as it's just, I'm doing 5 other things right now, and my camera's off and I'm, I trust that they're there. They'll respond occasionally, but I think that people are just really good at multitasking now, and they're just doing other things too. Yeah, we have a big 2-day training, 2 full day training coming up in August that we're all looking forward to. It is going to be face-to-face. And everyone's gonna talk to each other, and it's gonna be a lot of fun. Everyone loves seeing each other, but then you're just like, oh Lord, is this a multi-spreading? I hope not, but yeah.
Okay, so I think our time is up. I'm going to go ahead and close the room now, and then we'll go back.
Okay,
right.
Nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Everybody. Did you get a chance to talk? Is everybody back? Doesn't look like everybody's back, or maybe some people left.
Few more seconds.
Yeah, we still have a few.
Okay.
There we are.
All right, did everybody have enough time to just at least think a little bit? It was short, and I apologize. Anybody want to be a volunteer and just talk about some thoughts that were running through your group or your own head about getting started?
In our group, we just kind of talked about how we need to kind of get the PowerPoint and go through it again to really come up with the starting point. And it was all really great information. It's kind of like, now where do we start?
Good. I have a better suggestion, and I'm going to just tell Chris and Bev and Angie, I don't want the PowerPoint to go out. Let me make a better PowerPoint that doesn't have so much stuff on it, okay? That just kind of gives you URLs for references and kind of the steps that you would want to start thinking about, okay? Because there was a lot of stuff on that PowerPoint, and it's just the same thing I was talking about PD. We just think big as opposed to starting to be targeted. So let me see if I can do something a little better for you.
We also discussed just having more time to go through the website. That looked like a great resource to share. And so just having the time to go through that and process that and then share it with our staff that couldn't be present today, that, are supervising too. So, and then I think we all were just feeling the struggles of next fiscal year of how to implement all of this with knowing there's a funding shortage and just the staffing shortage we're feeling here in Texas.
Yep, well, everywhere, all over the country, we're having huge staffing shortages, which is probably why, and I'm not smart enough to do this myself, but we need to think of different levels of staff also in regard to even assigning different levels of families. We don't want to, we were just downstairs talking about this. This was put out by somebody. How come, how about this? Have we ever heard of, during a doctor shortage, people lowering the standards for doctors? How come we're talking about it during the teacher shortage? And think about it. It's acceptable that we don't require teachers to know a certain, and this was for talking about school, but that's what my fear is for EI, is that either we will start reducing the number of visits to families indiscriminately, meaning we're not looking at what families actually might be okay versus not okay, and then not tying that to what's the IFSP outcome. Or secondarily, we start taking folks in and not giving them enough training, such as paraeducators in schools. And because they get paid at a lower rate, there are more paraeducators than teachers sometimes, but we're not teaching them or training them. And the paraeducator argument is, one parent that I knew went in and said, for my third grader, and I wanted to talk about reading, I would never have or accept the teacher saying, oh, I don't really know where he is at reading. You can ask the paraeducator over there. She said, how come in special ed? That's acceptable, and I think that's what happens to us sometimes because we see the needs. We don't have enough people. but we start taking the wrong kind of shortcuts. So, you know, I think what you both are pointing out is that you need some more reflective time. And you have some very real issues that are not unique to Texas, but you have a Texas spin on them, which is, how are you going to survive? Papers today all about inflation, right? We're not going into a great economic time, and we have shortages of people not being able to do things. Front page on my paper today was, there's about 5,000 less kids now. That numbers probably mean nothing compared to Texas in infant toddler child care since before the pandemic. Not because the parents don't need it, because we don't have child care workers who will work with infants and toddlers. It's the same kind of, that's one sector. Take it to EI, we're going to start seeing the same sector issues. So it's a bigger strategic planning issue, but personnel have to be at the center of it. Any other thoughts?
I would say that actually relates into what my group was saying. I was in group 2, and one major theme that not only popped up here, but at our last summer series, I got the same feedback from people regarding the early intervention specialists qualifications and training. Since the ECI state office are the ones who credential EISs, they don't go through the same formal education that like a therapist would, etc. And related to what you were just talking about, we did recently change those qualifications, which did effectively reduce some of those qualifications by allowing certain degrees to not need, you know, the specific courses that they used to need. And that might have been the wrong direction. And so I do agree that some more reflection on that initial training for EISs and maybe incorporating some things that local programs are doing, like, you know, 6-hour trainings. And so that's definitely something that would be a good start, at least looking at the personnel that we credential.
Right. And I think, again, when you think about strategic planning for a state, it's really looking at what's going to make sense for this state without sacrificing quality. And, you know, maintaining a quality workforce, recognizing that there's not enough people, and therefore you can't train everybody to the same high standard, but you need to have team leads who have those standards. Different ways that you can staff. And again, it's going to be unique to each program and unique to the state. Anybody else? Last thoughts?
In our group, I know it was mentioned that there's this new world after COVID, and even, you know, employees, people are being a little bit more demanding about what they want. Talked about the budget cuts and how difficult it can be also to do the virtual training. And especially for new staff and even older staff, when you're doing training on Zoom, that it can be so easy to just multitask and tune out everything that they're supposed to be learning. So.
Yep. And training on Zoom is the antithesis of what we know adults need when they're learning new skills. It has to be job embedded. And even when we're doing virtual visits or virtual assessments, you know, as much as we're trying to look at the bright side, oh, we get to, you know, have more interaction sometimes with families, or we get to see the real routines and activities, it's not taking the place of human contact, which, you know, is how we thrive. And especially parents in need, that's what they need, is to have another human to be able to help them sometimes just get through the day. Well, you guys, I have a hard stop. I'm sorry to say, because we probably could be doing, because this was not the best example of adult learning by any means. So please do not think that I didn't know that I didn't do a very good job. Because we really should have more interaction, more reflection, more opportunities. And I'm sure we will in the future. And you guys can holler to Bev or Chris or Angie if you want to talk to me. They have my email address. I'll be happy to chat. I think this is a great opportunity, though, having this unifier, which is this grant, which is really unifying the whole EI system, looking at action plans moving forward, and being that personnel is the key here. You guys have a chance to be creative in ways that we probably never even thought of before. And that's what we need to do, is kind of push our creativity button on how we're going to maintain quality workforce and yet accommodate all the other stressors in the system right now. And it's not a quick fix, and it's certainly not anything any one person can do, but it's going to take a lot of human capital, such as your brains, to think about it. So, go ahead, Chris.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bruder, for your time. We really, really appreciate it. I posted the survey in the chat, if you all would take a few moments to do that. And then we look forward to seeing you at the next summer series event, which is focused on building a personnel pipeline. And that'll be August, is it 9th?
Yes.
And that'll be coming up soon.
And I just want to thank you all for taking the time to be part of this, and for all the work you've already engaged with us and trusted us and shared your thoughts about where we're going. And I really appreciate Dr. Bruder's comments, and really saying, you know, there's so many issues that we're tasked with, and it's hard to decide what is it that we want to, you know, what our target's going to be, but we have to start somewhere, right? And there's so many resources that you shared with us today that maybe you didn't even know already existed, because there's so much out there that it's hard to think about recreating everything and starting from zero. And this is a great way of starting with what's already there. So thank you for your work, Dr. Bruder, everybody else for.
I thank you. I thank you for the time. And
have a wonderful afternoon.
And stay cool if you can. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you. Bye, everyone.